It started before dawn, with tractor engines rumbling on country lanes and convoy lights cutting through the fog. By the time London commuters reached the outskirts of the capital, something unprecedented was already unfolding. Thousands of farmers from across England, Wales, and Scotland were moving toward the heart of the city, not quietly, not symbolically, but in a show of force meant to be seen and heard. By mid-morning, estimates put the number at around 15,000. Fields were left unattended, livestock schedules delayed, and entire rural communities seemed to empty out as farmers converged on Westminster with one message burning through the crowd: enough is enough. At the center of the outrage is what protesters have branded the death tax, a term that has ignited fierce emotions across the countryside. For many farmers, this is not an abstract policy debate or a distant budget line. It is deeply personal. It touches inheritance, family survival, and the fear that land passed down for generations could be lost with a single signature on a government document. As the tractors lined the streets and banners rose above the crowd, the anger felt raw, urgent, and unfiltered. Chants echoed off historic buildings as farmers in mud-stained boots stood shoulder to shoulder with their families. Some held photographs of parents and grandparents who had worked the same land decades earlier. Others carried hand-painted signs warning that the policy would kill family farms and sell Britain's soil to corporations. The mood was not festive. It was tense, determined, and emotionally charged, as if a breaking point had finally been reached. According to the farmers gathered today, the so-called death tax threatens to make it harder for farms to be passed on to the next generation without crippling financial consequences. They argue that agricultural land may look valuable on paper, but in reality, many farms operate on razor-thin margins. The fear is simple and devastating. When a farmer dies, their heirs may be forced to sell land just to pay the tax bill, breaking up farms that have existed for centuries. As the crowd swelled, London police moved quickly to secure key areas. Traffic slowed to a crawl, bridges were partially blocked, and helicopters hovered overhead. Tourists stopped in their tracks, phones raised, trying to understand why tractors were parked near iconic landmarks. Office workers pressed against windows, watching a rural uprising unfold in the capital's streets. It was a visual collision of two Britons that rarely meet on equal terms. Many farmers spoke of feeling ignored for years. Rising fuel prices, tighter environmental regulations, cheap imports, and unpredictable weather have already strained the sector. To them, this tax is not a single policy error, but the final straw in a long chain of pressures. In interviews conducted amid the noise and crowds, farmers described sleepless nights, fear for their children's future, and a sense that policymakers simply do not understand how farming works. One middle-aged farmer from Yorkshire described inheriting his land from his father, who inherited it from his grandfather. "This farm is not an investment," he said. "It's a responsibility. If they tax it like a luxury asset, they destroy everything we stand for." His words were met with nods and murmurs of agreement from those around him. The protest also revealed a generational divide. Younger farmers, many in their 20s and 30s, spoke about reconsidering their future in agriculture altogether. They questioned why they should stay in a profession that demands long hours, financial risk, and now the possibility of losing everything at inheritance. Older farmers looked on with visible concern, aware that without successors, rural Britain faces a slow and silent collapse. Inside Parliament, the demonstration sent shockwaves. Lawmakers arriving for sessions were met with chants and banners instead of the usual calm routine. Some MPs acknowledged the scale of the protest as impossible to ignore, while others urged calm and dialogue. Government spokespeople emphasized that the policy aims to ensure fairness and proper taxation, but protesters dismissed these explanations as detached and out of touch. What made today different from previous demonstrations was not just the numbers, but the unity. Farmers from different regions, producing different crops and livestock, stood together under a shared fear. Dairy farmers marched beside grain growers. Small family farms stood with larger operations. Political differences faded into the background as a single issue took center stage. Social media amplified the moment instantly. Videos of tractors rolling past historic buildings went viral within minutes. Hashtags related to the protest trended across platforms, with supporters praising the farmers' courage and critics questioning the disruption to city life. Comment sections filled with heated debates about taxation, food security, and the value of domestic agriculture. Supporters of the protest argue that this is not just a farmer's issue, but a national one. They warn that weakening family farms could increase reliance on imported food, reduce quality standards, and leave Britain vulnerable in times of global crisis. They point to recent supply chain disruptions as evidence that local food production is a matter of national security, not just economics. Critics, however, argue that taxation must be applied fairly and that large land holdings should not receive special treatment indefinitely. They question whether all farms affected are truly struggling or whether some wealthy estates are being protected under the banner of tradition. This tension has fueled a wider public debate, forcing the country to confront uncomfortable questions about wealth, inheritance, and who ultimately benefits from the system. As the day progressed, protest leaders attempted to deliver petitions and letters to government offices. The message was clear: pause the policy, consult the farming community, and reconsider the long-term consequences. Some representatives hinted that this demonstration was only the beginning, warning of further action if their concerns are dismissed. The atmosphere remained largely peaceful, but the intensity never faded. Every chant, every raised fist, every horn blast from a tractor carried the weight of accumulated frustration. Farmers spoke of feeling invisible for too long, and today was about reclaiming that visibility. Economists watching the protest noted that agriculture occupies a unique position in the national psyche. It is both an industry and a cultural backbone. Policies affecting farming resonate far beyond balance sheets, touching identity, heritage, and the relationship between land and people. Ignoring that emotional dimension, they warn, risks deepening the divide between rural and urban Britain. As evening approached, some farmers began the long journey back home, exhausted but resolute. Others vowed to stay overnight, determined to maintain pressure. The streets slowly cleared, but the impact of the day lingered. The images had already traveled far beyond London, reaching villages, farms, and households across the country. Whether the government will change course remains uncertain. What is certain is that today marked a turning point. A line was crossed when 15,000 farmers decided that silence was no longer an option. They came not just to protest attacks, but to defend a way of life they believe is under threat. In the days ahead, discussions will intensify, parliamentary debates will grow sharper, media scrutiny will increase, but for the farmers who stood in London today, the message has already been sent. They are watching, they are organized, and they are prepared to return if necessary. This was more than a protest, it was a warning, a reminder that behind every policy are real people, real families, and real land. As the dust settles and tractors head back to the countryside, one question now dominates the national conversation. Will those in power listen before irreversible damage is done, or has the fuse already been lit?